Cain was an ugly weakling who died trying to save some baddies and got reincarnated as a rich noble. However, when he discovers he's been blessed by the gods with max-level cheat skills, he tries to hide it to live a normal life, but still ends up clapping everyone. It all begins in his past life when Cain heads to the store, but suddenly spots two ladies running from a psychopath, threatening to hack them to pieces. Cain stupidly tries to tackle the attacker, but when he gets stabbed, he realizes he's not Captain America, and he can't do this all day. As Cain closes his eyes forever, the ladies run towards him and weep instead of calling 911. Afterwards, Cain awakens in an unfamiliar room, thinking it's the hospital until a maiden woman, claiming to be his mother, hug him because he's finally woken up from his fever. Confused, Cain's gaze drifts to a mirror, and he realizes he's now been isekai'd into the body of a shrimp. Later, Cain learns that he's now the third son of a high-ranking noble named Garm, and this world has swords and magic. That evening, Cain tells his family he wants to learn magic, but his sister, Rain, says he needs to be baptized first, which will take another 2 years. However, Cain secretly practices in his room and discovers he's a natural at using magic, while almost burning the house down. 2 years later, Cain and his family head to the temple for his baptism as Rain shows him her status screen, which is on level 2. Garm then explains that there are 5 levels of protection from the gods, which determines the user's talent. At this, they head inside for the ceremony, but a bright light suddenly floods the temple, and Cain finds himself standing before the gods. There's Enum, the god of creation, introduces himself and reveals that they know about his reincarnation. Apparently, Cain's death was pointless, since the criminal would have tripped and fallen if he did nothing, so he was reincarnated as a reward for his good deed. As a bonus, all the gods decide to grant Cain their protection, giving him numerous abilities, but as the meeting comes to an end, Zenom laughs suspiciously. When Cain returns to his body, Garm asks Cain to show them his status, but he rushes out to check it alone and finds that all his abilities are maxed out to level 10, even though the maximum is 5. Realizing the gods have gone crazy, Cain uses status conceal so no one would find out. Later that day, at the dinner table, Garm asks Cain to show them his status, so Cain opens it. But despite his status concealment, his father freaks out when he sees Cain's outrageous magical points. Because of this, Garm tells Cain never to show his status to anyone else, since he can become a threat to the kingdom and might be kept under state supervision. Afterwards, Cain heads to his room and finds a book on summoning magic, so he heads out to practice by summoning fluffy animals. However, he ends up summoning your girlfriend. Sorry, I meant an angry monster. Coincidentally, Rain and her friend Parma, a beast folk girl, are in the area, so the beast turns towards them. But Cain rushes to protect them and attacks the beast, but gets caught in its hand. As Cain flashes back to his heroic exit from his previous life, he casts a spell that annihilates the monster, but falls to the ground thinking he's dying again. However, he soon sits up and sees that he's still alive, and as Rain hugs him, he realizes he can actually help people in this world. The next day, while Cain thanks the people for celebrating his birthday, his dad asks what he'd like to be since he can't inherit the estate. So Cain announces that he'd like to be an adventurer. Later, Garm tells Cain that he'll need to study more to become an adventurer and decides to arrange a tutor for him. So, one day, when Cain gets notified that his tutor has arrived, he rushes to his window to see who it is, but mistakenly teleports into the air. He then drops and accidentally collides with Melly's bouncy castle.
Yeah, boy.
While he finds his way out of the Milky Way mountains, Melly comments that she doesn't have any milk yet. So, Cain apologizes while the butler introduces Melly and Nina as his tutors, and in response, Cain introduces himself. Afterwards, when Melly spars with Cain, she realizes he's not a newbie. So Nina asks if he has the protection of the god of war. When Cain confirms this, Melly begs him to stop and asks Nina to take over Cain's magic training. So Nina says up front that she has a level 3 protection from the god of magic and suggests they start with the basics. However, Cain points out that he's learned all that from the books and shows off his water, fire, and earthbending skills. Surprised by the damage his magic caused, Nina says he's a genius since he could cast such spells at his age and use all elements when even palace mages can't. So Nina asks if he has the protection of the god of magic, and when Cain confirms this, Melly points out that there's nothing left to teach. Shortly after, the ladies inform Garm that training Cain at an intermediate level in the mansion could destroy the mansion, and Garm says he saw it coming. So Melly suggests they continue his training outside the mansion, and Garm grants their request on the condition that they'll return before sundown and train nearby. A few moments later, as they head outside the mansion, Nina asks Cain to try his intermediate level magic on a boulder, and he suddenly unleashes an inferno that shocks the ladies and ends up leaving a crater behind. After this, Cain apologizes for going overboard, while Melly comments that tons of his magic should have been drained. When Cain says he feels just fine, the ladies realize he's got an insane amount of magic too. Just then, they sense something approaching them, and a rabbit with fangs suddenly charges out of the bush. So Melly draws her sword to attack it, but the beast evades her and attacks Cain instead. Immediately, Cain dodges and takes it out with air bullets. Seeing this, the ladies commend Cain on his first hunt and point out that he could sell the meat and hide. However, Cain responds, saying he'll show it to his mother and sister. Afterwards, he takes out his item box, which absorbs the dead beast. On seeing this, Melly says she's been saving up to buy a magic bag. But since Cain has no idea what that is, she explains that it's the overpriced light version of his item box. Since they have time, Melly suggests they hunt some more monster rabbits and tells Nina to use her search skill. Nina magically scans the area and locates a few monster rabbits. Curious, Cain asks how she pulled that off, and Nina explains that she searched for the monster's magic by spreading her magic out in a thin layer. Immediately, Cain replicates the magic and takes it further by visualizing and giving a head count of the monsters. Surprised, Nina says that only a few people can replicate the magic. But before she finishes, Cain runs off and obliterates the monsters with the support of his tutors turned sidekicks. When the last monster runs off into a nearby forest, Cain tries to go after it, but Melly stops him and explains that it's the forest where strong monsters live. In addition, she explains that once every decade, the monsters attack the city in their numbers and encourages Cain to become a strong adventurer so he can protect the people when the time comes. The next day, Cain and his tutors visit the guild to step up the challenge for him, so they ask the receptionist if there's any monsters stronger than monster rabbits. In response, the lady says there are only wolves, so Melly decides they should be perfect for Cain. Surprised, the receptionist casually asks him how old he is, but when Nina reveals that he's the son of the domain lord, the receptionist apologizes and introduces herself as Rudy. Just then, an ugly-faced adventurer calls Mel and Nina D-rank adventurers while asking if babysitting was the only quest they could bag. When he asks Melly to pour him a drink, she tells him to visit the red light district. When Nina adds that they're working, Cross reminds them he's a C rank and tells the girls to obey their superior. So he grabs Nina's hood, making Melly protest, but she gets restrained by Cross's underlings. After this, Cross tries to touch Nina, but Cain grabs his hand and slaps Cross's face so hard that he lands on his back. Annoyed by this, Cross decides to teach Cain a lesson, but ends up being taught himself. Despite this, Cross gets back up and attacks again, but Cain easily evades his attacks, so Cross draws out his sword and tries to hack the boy to pieces. However, Cain evades the attack and ends up stopping the sword with his finger. Afterwards, Cain throws out the trash while Nina thanks him for saving them. 3 years later, Sylvia informs Cain that his instructors have refused to extend the duration of their contract and asks if she should request that they reconsider. But Cain says he can't tie down the adventurers for too long and wonders if there's a way to thank them for being good to him. Suddenly, he recalls that Melly once said she wanted a magic bag. So later at night, Cain heads into the dangerous forest to get monster materials and spots a blood auger. So he attacks the beast. His fire spell catches the attention of a guard on watch. Meanwhile, Cain goes and looks around the forest and finds an earth dragon, so he casts his spell again, and this time the guard thinks it's a monster outbreak and raises an alarm. Suddenly, soldiers march out while the people panic. While Garm leads out the army, Cain absorbs the monster into his item box and suddenly vanishes. Unknown to him, he dropped a handkerchief bearing his family crest. Shortly after, when Gam and his army arrive, they're shocked to find a crater. A mage then comments that he's been using his search skill, but hasn't found any monsters. Just then, Garm spots the handkerchief and freaks out. The next day, during training, Cain takes out a pack of wolves with air bullets, while his tutors feel sad since it's their last day on the job. After Cain announces that he's done, Melly announces that he's finally graduating and commends him for being a good student. Cain then brings out the magical bags he crafted for his tutors and explains that he made them with materials from a blood auger and an earth dragon. Shocked, Melly points out that they are beasts that teams of A-rank adventurers can barely take down. But Nina reminds her he's Cain after all. Cain then assures them that the bag can fit a mansion, making the ladies freak out. Sometime later, Cain single-handedly defeats a dragon, and on checking his status, he freaks out to see he's now an enemy of all monsters. 2 years later, Cain visits the royal capital to make his debut, as every other noble son does. On the way with his family, Rain suggests that Cain take the entry exams and start attending school. However, Garm points out that Cain has 2 more years to go. After this, Cain asks how long it'll take to get to the capital, and Garm responds by saying it'll take a week if no monster gets in the way. On hearing this, Cain uses his search ability and senses something happening up ahead. He then quickly tells Garm that there's a battle going on ahead, surprising Garm, who then wonders how he could read that far. So Garm informs his escort and commands them to go help. However, Cain says they won't get there in time, so he jumps out of the carriage, ignoring Garm's warning, and glides through the air past the soldiers like he's on hoverboard. Some kilometers ahead, a group of monsters toss a soldier against a carriage, while the last man standing holds his ground and decides to protect the carriage no matter what. Suddenly, a monster attacks the soldier, but Cain arrives just in time to exterminate it. Surprised, the soldier comments that Cain shouldn't be there, but Cain ignores this and takes out more of the monsters using his magic. While he floats, he looks down and spots the monsters approaching the carriage. So he descends and exterminates them with his sword, leaving one. Furious, the beast tries to crush Cain, but he leaps high and divides the monster with a flaming sword. Afterwards, he asks the soldiers if they're all right, but the soldier tells him not to approach the carriage. So Cain keeps his sword and introduces himself as Garm's son. Just then, the soldiers arrive, and while they introduce themselves, they're surprised to see Cain on the scene and all the monsters dead. The soldier guarding the carriage then collapses, but Cain rushes over and states that he can use healing magic. Suddenly, Cain heals every injured soldier on the scene and tells them to rest and eat to recover fully. He then absorbs the bodies of the fallen soldiers into his item box. Shortly after, Garm's carriage arrives, and on stepping out, he marvels at the sight. When he spots the crest on the carriage, he realizes it is from the house of a duke called Eric. So he asks if the duke is safe, but the carriage door suddenly opens, and Garm is shocked to find Celestia, the princess in silk, the duke's daughter. So Garm and Cain pay their respects while the ladies thank them for saving them from danger. After this, their gazes shift to Cain, so he introduces himself and offers to calm their minds with his magic. When the ladies tell him to go ahead, Cain suddenly conjures a glowing bubble that makes the ladies feel good. Suddenly, the ladies introduce themselves to Cain and thank him for saving them. However, the ladies soon start quarreling over Cain. When Silk asks what Cain was doing out in the middle of nowhere, he says he's on his way to the capital for his debut. Excited, Celestia reveals they're on the way to theirs as well, so they drag him onto the carriage with them. After a while, Cain wonders why they have to cram themselves in the carriage and suggests that he sit on the empty seat, but Celestia says she'll only feel better with him beside her. When they arrive at a town, Cain tells the ladies he'll see them in the morning, but Celestia says she'd like to see him at night since she's still traumatized, and Silk also says the same. Coincidentally, Garm overhears the conversation and chips in that it's inappropriate for them to share a room. However, since Cain is the strongest in the world, the ladies insist and ask Cain if he doesn't want to share a room with them. In response, Cain agrees on the condition that the room is huge, but his father advises him to use his head and nothing else. Later that night in the room, the ladies cling to Cain and state that they'd like to sleep beside him. Eventually, the ladies agree that Cain will sleep in the middle and shift their beds close to his. However, Cain suggests that they return the beds to the way they were, but the ladies claim a monster might attack. However, Cain agrees and says he'll be too anxious to sleep. The next morning, Cain stares blankly with bags under his eyes while the ladies ask if he slept well. This continues for the following days until their group resumes their journey to the royal capital. Eventually, when they arrive at the royal capital, the carriage halts in the palace. They are welcomed by Diem, the vice captain of the chivalric order, who then asks why the ladies cling to Cain. Immediately, Cain throws off their hands and explains that they're just scared. When the ladies won't stop yapping about how Cain saved them, Diem introduces himself and states that the knights have explained everything that happened to him. He then thanks Cain for saving them and bringing his fallen comrades home. Just then, Cain takes out the fallen soldiers' bodies from his item box, and when he tries to leave, Diem holds him and states that he'll have an audience with the king. A few moments later, Cain marches into the king's court and bows before the king, while a man narrates how he eliminated an army of orcs and even brought home the fallen heroes. While the people wonder if it's true, the king rewards him by making him a baron and granting him a mansion of his own. Shocked, the nobles murmur that he is too young to be granted peerage. Suddenly, Corgino, one of the nobles, steps forward and protests against this, but the king asks him if he could single-handedly eliminate the orcs like Cain did. After his protest was cancelled, Corgino vanishes, while the king asks Cain if he'll accept the offer. Cain then takes the offer with gratitude, and the king invites him to join him in the parlor. Afterwards, the king and duke, alongside their daughters, meet with Cain and Garm. Then Duke Eric introduces himself, and the king suggests they talk about Kane's future. The king then reveals that he granted Kane peerage because of his outstanding talents, and asks if he'd like to take Telestia's hands in marriage. When the Duke also chips in that silk is also up for grabs, Kane freaks out while the ladies blush. To calm his nerves, the king states that they'll only be engaged and formally married when they grow up. However, this freaks Kane out more as he asks why, and the king says it's what he gets for sharing a room with 2 unmarried ladies. When Kane says it's not his fault, the king and Duke blackmail Kane into accepting the offer. Later, Kane visits the gods and apologizes for not showing up earlier. After this, he consults them about his status, and they reveal that although he's the most powerful of humans, he could go further to become a demigod and be on par with divine beasts. After this, Zenom points out that the realm is boring and asks Kane if he could use the knowledge from his previous life to create some entertainment. Hearing this, Kane figures he could actually import ideas from his previous world, and it'd be a guaranteed hit. Sometime after this, Kane visits a clothing store with Rain and feels awkward while she shops. Suddenly, Kane rushes out and spots a pair of familiar cat ears. Just then, he realizes it's Parma, and she asks what he's doing there. In response, Kane says he's at the capital for his debut, while Parma says she's training at her uncle's shop. Coincidentally, Tomanis, her uncle, steps out and asks Parma who her boyfriend is. In response, Parma states that Kane is a noble, shocking Tomanis, who then apologizes for being rude. But Kane brushes it off and asks if he could check his shop. Afterwards, in the shop, Kane says that he'd like to create a recreational item. When Kane adds that he already has some idea and asks if Tomanis would be willing to produce and sell it. After Tomanis accepts the deal, Kane shows his board game idea to Tomanis, who then comments that it's entertaining and adds that he could offer the game at an affordable price. So Kane asks if he could make a prototype first and drops a gold coin to cover the cost. Shocked, Tomaris says it's too much, but Kane convinces him by telling him to think of it as an upfront investment. After Tomaris promises to give it his best, Kane heads out and freaks out when he finds an angry Rain waiting for him. Rain then berates Kane for bailing on her when she needed him to check her outfits. In response, Kane says she looks good in whatever she wears, making Rain blush. Some days later, Kane visits Tomanis' store and marvels at the finished game, while Tomanis says it still needs refining. When he asks Kane how it looks, Kane says it looks just like he pictured it in his head. Afterward, they test run the game, and after Kane wins, Tomanis comments that the game will definitely blow up. So, Kane suggests that Tomanis make a regular version and a premium version for the nobles, since they'll want a fancier product, while the regular version can be made affordable for everyone. When Kane adds that they can produce more depending on sales, Tomanis complains that his company lacks funds, so Kane drops more gold coins, shocking Tomanis, who then promises to give his best. After this, Tomanis suggests they draw up a contract and present it to the god of commerce, since doing that would prevent anyone from stealing their idea for 3 years. They stretch their hands to the game while Tomanis reads the vows, and suddenly the game glows and vanishes. Seeing this, Kane is surprised, so Tomanis explains that the game is now fully theirs. Kane suggests that Tomanis make one more extravagant one for the royal household, but on hearing this, Tomanis freaks out, saying a mid-scale company like his can't produce anything worthy of the royal household. However, when Kane says he believes in him, Tomanis agrees to make one. Later, on the day of his debut, while they ride to the palace, Garm tells Kane to watch out for parents trying to force their daughters down his throat. Soon after, Kane walks into the palace and spots Corgino frowning and standing with his sons, so he ignores them and goes to greet Eric and Silk. Although scared of her father's smile, Kane goes ahead to compliment Silk's outfit, making her blush. Seeing this, Eric points out that Kane is a natural with the ladies, while Garm explains that he's learned from dealing with his sister. Suddenly, the king arrives, and while he addresses the audience, Kane spots Telestia beside him. After they raise a toast, Kane and his parents pay homage to the king, so the king asks Kane to greet Telestia also. Kane compliments Telestia by saying that her beautiful looks stole his breath away. Impressed, the king asks Garm how he raised Kane to be a Riz Lord, while Telestia blushes shamelessly. After this, Kane reveals that he brought a present for the king and pulls out the game. While the king wonders what it is, Kane explains that it's a game he developed with the Saracen company. Impressed, the king says he'd like to learn more about it later, and tells Kane to meet him at the parlor later, since they need to talk about his daughter. Afterwards, while Kane chats with Silk over wine, Habit, Corgino's son, shows up and compliments Silk's dress. While Kane watches in surprise, one of Habit's sidekicks tells Kane to fade into the background and berates him for not greeting them. Kane greets Habit and introduces himself as a baron. However, the boys assume he's a baron's son and insist that Cain address Habit as master. Feeling fly, Habit comments that Cain must have come from a poor barony, that he couldn't use his last name. He then tells Cain to apologize or face consequences. Hearing this, Silk asks what he means, and Cain points out that Habit is the one being rude. Annoyed by this, Habit suggests they thrash it out outside. Some moments later, they meet out on the lawn where Silk asks Cain what he plans to do. In response, Cain says she should have stayed back. Habit then tells them to quit flying and brags about his friend's magical abilities. So the first one steps up, reads a spell from a book, and performs a choreography just to fire off a peanut-sized fireball. After this, the other guy decides to wow them with his earth magic, but ends up embarrassing his ancestors. Annoyed by this, Silk suggests they stop the senseless squealing and explains that Cain is a baron and not a son of one. When she adds that he single-handedly saved her and Telestia from an army of orcs, the boys bow down and beg for forgiveness. After they fade into the woodwork, Silk points out that Cain intentionally refused to correct the boys and comments that she'll have to tell Telestia about his dark side. Cain then begs her not to, but Silk says she'll keep his secret if he goes on a date with her. Just then, Telestia shows up, asking what the secret is about, so Cain covers Silk's mouth, shocking Telestia, who then says it's scandalous to touch an unmarried lady's mouth. She then threatens to tell Eric if he doesn't spill, so Silk reveals that they're going on a date. Hearing this, Telestia gets jealous and says she'd like to go too. So Cain agrees, but the king shows up and overhears the conversation. Facing Cain, the king then points out that they have more things to talk about apart from his game. Afterwards, Magna hands Cain the map and key to his mansion and reveals that the king is busy. Relieved, Cain thinks he'll get to go home early, but just then, Eric walks in with the board game and challenges Cain to play. Immediately, Cain agrees to play. More nobles flock in, asking to play too. Afterwards, Cain finds his way to his mansion, but arrives at a vampire hideout instead. So he goes inside and checks out the room, which is quite filthy. So he casts a spell to clean up and repair the building, and immediately the building gets restored. After this, he casts another spell and furnishes the entire house. Excited, he hops on his bed thinking he can finally invite the girls over, but he hears someone call his name. So he heads out and finds Sylvia with some other maids and a butler, who introduces himself as Colin. Sylvia heads out to receive Cain's belongings, while Colin tells Cain to head to Garm's mansion and leave them to handle things. Suddenly, Cain remembers that his brothers were coming home. Later at Garm's mansion, Jin comments that he never thought Cain would receive peerage and own a mansion before them. Rain then says she's proud of Rain and can't wait to see his mansion. Shortly after, Cain takes his parents and sister to his mansion, and while they marvel at the sight, Garm wonders how things have changed since the house was falling apart when he last visited. Cain then explains that he remodeled and cleaned the house with magic. After they check different sections of the house, Garm points out that it's missing some artworks, since nobles are fond of them. So Cain reveals that he actually put up one, but they suddenly hear someone scream in the house. Thinking it's an attack, they rush to the scene and find the maids terrified by Cain's artwork. When Garm sees it, he freaks out too, but Cain explains that it's a mounted red dragon. So Garm asks why he has such a thing in the house, and Cain explains that he once defeated it when he went into the forest. Shocked, Garm points out that the red dragon is a calamity-class monster that a rank adventurers can't take down without losing men. While Garm talks about how much the mounted dragon costs, they suddenly hear a scream in the house and rush to check what happened. Just then, they find Sarah and freak out, because the toilet auto-washes its user when they're done. So while Cain explains that he used his magic, Garm says they're just overreacting over a mere toilet. So Sarah suggests he tries it out, and when he does, Garm freaks out and says they could ask Cain to do it if they wanted. After this, Garm points out that Cain's visitors would be pleased when they see it, surprising Cain, who then asks what he means. In response, Garm states that when nobles own a new mansion, they must host a party to launch it. Later that night, Colin tells Cain that he has already made a list of people to invite to the party. So Cain checks the list, and when he spots Corgino's name, he asks if he must invite him. And Colin says it's common sense to invite high-ranking nobles. After this, he asks if he can invite the king, but Colin explains that only those ranked as a count or higher can do so. After thinking of everything that'll be needed, Cain freaks out, wondering what he could gift the nobles, so Sylvia suggests he adhere to his own brand of hospitality. Soon after, Cain creates a wine glass out of nothing, impressing Sylvia, and adds that he'll be giving the wine glass as gifts. When Sylvia assures him that his guest will love it, Cain decides to begin mass production. Next, he visits the chef who had created a dish from a recipe Cain gave him. Just then, Sylvia joins them, so Cain asks her to taste the food, and when she does, she freaks out in excitement. Cain then reveals that it's called Hamburg steak. And to top it all off, when Sylvia tries the drink, she marvels at how perfectly it goes with the meat. When he asks Sylvia for reviews, she asks for another glass and ends up ruining her wine-tasting career. Just then, Colin informs Cain that a messenger has arrived from the palace. Afterwards, Cain sits in a meeting with the clearly pissed-off king, who then asks why he hasn't received an invitation to his party when everyone else has. When he crashes out, reminding Cain that he gave him the mansion, Cain explains that he had planned to give him the invitation but delayed till the right time. So when he drops the invitation, the king suddenly lights up and flaunts it. Meanwhile, Cain was grateful he followed Colin's advice to take an invitation along. Some days later, Cain and Garm welcome the guests at the door. On entering the house, Eric and Silk marvel at the sight of his mounted red dragon. However, when Silk gets excited about moving in soon, Eric says she's getting ahead of herself. A few moments later, when Cain addresses his guests, he thanks them for coming and raises a toast. On tasting the sparkling wine, the guests float in excitement and comment on the beautiful wine glasses. In response, Cain says it's their souvenir, and Eric thanks him for this. Just then, the king arrives and apologizes for interrupting the party. After taking his seat, he checks out the served wine and comments that he's never seen anything like it. So he takes a sip and freaks out in excitement while he gets served the meal. On taking a bite, the king asks what it is, and Cain explains that it's made with processed meat. While the king throws a tantrum, the queen suddenly rushes over to announce that water sprouted up from the toilet and insists that Cain must put one at the palace. When the king asks what she's talking about, the queen suggests he tries it out too. After using the restroom, the king steps out and says it's unforgivable that Cain would keep such from him. So he orders Cain to put one at the palace the next day and comments that Cain's hospitality is the best ever seen. While everyone applauds Cain for this, Corgino arrives. Even though Cain welcomes him at the door, the bloated idiot calls the mansion a doghouse, but freaks out at the sight of the red dragon. Afterwards, he walks in like he owns the place and gets served, but after tasting the wine and food, he freaks out but pretends it's nothing special. To improve his mood, Cain presents him with some wine glasses as gifts, but Corgino commands Cain to give him all the drinks, glasses, and a recipe for the meal. When Cain refuses, Corgino insists, so Cain scans the environment and realizes the king is on his way. So he offers to give Corgino the country's biggest jewel. Suddenly, the king arrives, and on seeing him, Corgino fidgets and says he was just impressed with the glasses and asked how they were made. Right there in public, the king gives him a pep talk on how a marquis should behave and makes him vanish from the scene. Sometime later, Cain meets Dem at the palace and reveals that Magda asked him to drop off some monster materials. So Dem takes him into a storeroom, but Cain says it's too small for what he has. Shocked, Dem asks if the monsters are as big as the mounted red dragon at his mansion, but Cain says he has only a few earth dragons. Shocked, Dem asks if it's the same kind that a party of A-rank adventurers can't take down. In response, Cain says he has no idea but knows for sure that it is huge. So Dem asks him to leave the monster materials in the yard. Afterwards, Cain unboxes a heap of dead gigantic monsters while Dem stares in disbelief and asks if he's a disciple of the gods, but Cain says he's just a son of Margrave. When Cain turns to leave, Dem asks him to help out with the knights' training and adds that he'll meet the captain of the knights since she loves strong people. Soon after, Dem introduces Cain to the knights as the baron who annihilated 30 orcs and saved the princess. When Cain asks about the captain, Dem states that she'll show up as soon as the mock battle begins. So Dem calls for the fight to start, but one of the knights points out that Cain is too young. Dem then asks him to attack first if he's worried, so the knight decides to give Cain a handicap. Suddenly, Cain boosts his speed and takes down the knight in one hit. However, when he takes that as his exit cue, Dem stops him and suggests he take on the entire order. However, when the knights surround Cain with drawn swords, Tawana, the captain, jumps down from a roof and asks why they're attacking a boy. After treating Cain like a lost pet, Tawana asks Dem why he didn't stop the knights. So Dem reveals who Cain is. On hearing this, Tawana freaks out and draws her sword, insisting he must duel with her. Just then, Dem comments that she holds the Master Swordsperson title while Cain wonders what that is. Moments later, Tawana points her sword at Cain, but he states that he only has a wooden sword. Despite this, Tawana says she has dulled her sword and attacks Cain. When he responds with a swing, Tawana evades the attack and boosts her speed. Suddenly, she charges towards Cain, but he matches up to her with a wooden sword, to the surprise of the knights. After a while of dangerously clashing swords, Cain teleports behind Tawana and puts his sword to her neck. Shocked, Tawana says she's finally found the one. So she hugs him, but he reminds her that his family jewels are barely formed, and he knows nothing about her. In response, Tijuana introduces herself as a viscount and the daughter of Duke Liebert. In addition, she explains that she's got time since she's an elf and her looks won't change. Hearing this, Kane puts some distance between them. After going back and forth with him, Tijuana tells Dame to request an audience with the king and bring Kane along. So Dame drags Kane along as they leave. At the palace, Tijuana informs the king that she's decided to marry Kane, shocking the king, who then asks Kane to explain. When he does, the king asks if he hasn't told Tijuana about Celestia and Silk, but he says it's a confidential matter. Just then, Garm reveals that Tijuana is the princess of the elf nation, and since the elves were always dragged into wars, the kingdom of Esford took their land under protection. After this, the king tells Tijuana that Kane is already engaged to Celestia and Silk, but says she understands and grabs Kane, saying she's more attracted to him that way. The king tells Tijuana to write her letter to get her father's permission first, so she grabs Kane and drags him out the door. Just then, the king says he can't believe Kane beat Tijuana and wonders why he's so strong at his age. When the king directs the question to Garm, he says he has no idea either and reveals that Kane once took down a red dragon by himself. So, Magna chips in that there's a way to test Kane. Some days later, Kane bumps into Dime, who then notices that he looks exhausted. In response, Kane reveals that he's been going on sword-clashing dates with Tijuana. In addition, Kane reveals that the Master Swordsperson title was added to his status. When he turns to leave, Dime grabs him and drags him to see the king. On meeting with the king reveals that he summoned Kane to show him something. After this, Magna shows Kane an emperor-level magic text that has been passed down through the royal family and was written by the first King Yuya. Impressed, Kane asks if he can check it out, so the king tells him to go ahead. He then opens the book and freaks out, saying it contains spells he's never seen before. When he comments that it contains higher-level spells, the king says that his suspicions were right, surprising Kane, who then asks what he means. In response, the king reveals that none of them could read the text, since it was written in Japanese by Yuya. At this point, Kane realizes his cover is blown, so when the king asks him who he is, Kane promises to tell the truth on the condition that only those present will ever know, and adds that he'll leave the kingdom if they can't keep it that way. So when the king agrees, Kane explains that he has memories from his previous life in a place where Yuya came from. While they all marvel at this, Kane apologizes for keeping it from them. Garm then asks if he's really the son, and Kane reveals that the gods told him he was when he was baptized. Shocked, the king asks if he really met the gods, and Kane confirms that he also meets them every time he visits the church. Just then, Garm asks Kane to show them his status, but when he does, they all freak out and realize he's telling the truth. The king then says that with his title, everyone in the kingdom should bow to him. However, Kane says it's not what he wants and reveals that he lost his family in his previous world and is lucky to have made a new one. He then begs them to treat him like they always have. Suddenly, Tijuana barges in with a letter of permission from her father and runs off with Kane. Eric then points out that they've got nothing to worry about, since Kane will always be Kane. So the king agrees with him and commands everyone to keep the secret. The next day, Kane reads Yuya's text, where he narrates how he got summoned to the world after he was in an accident. All of a sudden, Celestia and Silk show up and ask him what he's up to. When Kane says it's nothing, Silk guesses he's studying for the academy entrance exams, and Kane decides to play along. However, when the ladies offer to study with him, Kane says he's not into that kind of thing and runs off before they pin him down. However, just when he thinks he's free, Tijuana comes running and asks if he wants to mock battle the next day. But Kane apologizes and says they could some other time before running off. When he clocks 12, Kane dresses up and heads to the Adventurers Guild to get registered. On entering the guild, Kane is distracted by the surroundings and bumps into a red-haired dude, who then asks if it's his first time. When Kane reveals that he plans to register as an adventurer, the guy reminds him that he's got only one life. Afterwards, Kane heads to the counter and meets the receptionist, who hands him a form to fill out. After he's done, he was asked to place a drop of his blood on a crystal to register his magic capacity on the guild card. After this, he was awarded a G-rank card, and he suddenly remembers his tutors were D-rank adventurers. After this, the receptionist introduces herself as Risha and wishes Kane luck. All of a sudden, some adventurers tell Risha to ditch Kane and hang out with them. Seeing this, Kane sighs in disgust, so the adventurer tries to kick him, but Kane dodges the kick, making the adventurer slip. Just when the friends jointly attack Kane, they bump into each other, so the leader tries to draw a knife, but Claude, the red-haired guy, shows up and asks why they're bullying Kane. Upon seeing Claude, the bullies say he's from the Ice Flame and run off. Afterwards, Cain thanks Claude for his help, but Claude states that he saved them since he could tell that Cain was pretty strong. Claude then asks Cain to join him for a drink in return for the great show he put on. Shortly after, Claude hands Cain a cup of fruit juice and comments that he must have practiced a lot to be able to move as he did. In response, Cain says that tutors trained him since he was little and asks what the bullies meant by the ice flame. Claude explains that it's the name of his party, where he uses the flame sword and his wife uses the ice magic. When Cain expresses his surprise to hear this, Claude suggests he find a trustworthy party to work with so he can take on big quests and level up quickly. He then shows Cain his golden adventurer card, and Cain figures he must be A rank. Suddenly, Claude gets hit on the head by Lena, his wife, for drinking when they'd just taken a quest. Just then, Cain introduces himself to Lena and adds that Claude saved him from some bullies. When she tells Cain to let her know if anyone troubles him, Claude chips in that there's more to Cain than meets the eye. However, Lena drags Claude away from his cup, and they bid Cain farewell as they leave. Afterwards, Cain checks the quest boards and realizes most quests for his rank involve being a glorified delivery boy. Suddenly, he finally finds a goblin hunting quest and chooses it, but just when he steps out, Tijuana finds him and runs up to grab him. Surprised, he asks what she's doing there, and she reveals that she was training outside the city. When she asks him the same question, Cain reveals he just registered as an adventurer. All of a sudden, Tijuana says she'll go on the quest with him and tells Dan to take over the training. When they arrive in the forest, Tijuana turns the heroic quest into a honeymoon trip. Meanwhile, Cain scans the area for the goblins and reveals that he's found the goblins straight ahead. Shortly after, they find a broken carriage, and while they look around, Tijuana spots the goblins attacking a man, so they rush over. And while Cain heals the wounded man, Tijuana draws her sword and takes out the goblins. When she encounters more goblins, Cain casts his protection magic on her, and Tijuana goes to work cutting down goblins. After she takes down the last one, an army of green lizards emerges from the bushes. Cain tells Tijuana to take the man to safety and cast an ice pillar spell to extinguish the green lizards. Later, when Cain arrives at the guild, he reports that he defeated some green lizards on his quest. Surprised, Rada explains that defeating one green lizard is a D-rank quest, while defeating multiple is for C ranks. However, when Cain says that he defeated about 30 of them, Rada freaks out and reports to Cedric, a chief in the guild. So Cedric meets Cain and asks him to tell the truth, since there's no way Cain could have pulled it off. When Cain insists that he defeated them normally, Cedric points out that Cain is just a commoner trying to swindle the guild for money. After this, he decides to revoke Cain's guild card, but Rada says it's an abuse of authority. Hearing this, Cain freaks out, thinking his dreams are about to shatter before his eyes. Luckily, the guild master walks in and asks what's going on, and Cedric accuses Cain of cheating. However, when Cain insists that he didn't cheat, the guildmaster stares him in the face and tells Cedric that he still has a lot to learn. After this, the guildmaster tells Tijuana to come in, and on entering the room, she hugs Cain, calling him her husband, and surprising everyone in the room. When the guildmaster refers to Cain as a baron and reveals that he's the hero who saved Telestia and Silk, Cedric couldn't believe his ears. In addition to this, the guildmaster reveals that Cain would become his brother-in-law when he marries Tijuana, surprising Cain. Suddenly, Cedric bows and apologizes to Cain. After Cain accepts Cedric's apology, he asks if the guild will take the green lizards, and in response, the guildmaster says they will and offers to upgrade Cain's rank to level C. However, Tijuana says it's not enough, because Cain defeated a red dragon and is stronger than she is. The guildmaster decides to make Cain an A rank on the condition that he'll subjugate some bandits. After he tells Rada and Cedric to handle the paperwork, the guildmaster tells Cain to take care of his sister. Meanwhile, the gods watch, and Zenom comments that they need to make Cain stronger. Curious, Santos asks why, and Zenon reveals that Aaron's seal will soon be broken. Hearing this, the gods freak out while Zenom explains that no one knows what will happen since Aaron was sealed 300 years ago. When Santos asks how they can make him stronger, Zenon reveals there's someone hidden somewhere who would make a fine master for him. Sometime later, Sylvia barges into Cain's room and says she forgot to wake him on the day of his academy entrance exams. When he tries to get more sleep, Sylvia grabs him and successfully gets him on his way to the academy. While Sylvia beats herself up, Cain tells her not to worry and teleports directly into the academy. He then heads to a counter where he gets his exam number and venue. On his way, he wonders why there is no one familiar on the list, so he enters the class and sits to write the exam. When the exam starts, Cain realizes it's a piece of cake, so he finishes before everyone else and decides to take a nap. Afterwards, they head out to carry out the magical ability assessment, and the teacher instructs the student to choose a target and direct their strongest spell at it. Curious, Cain asks if they can use their full power, and the teacher assures him that there's a defensive barrier around the area. So, while the other students shoot lame fireballs, Cain gets called up, so he shoots off a fire bullet that destroys the target alongside the walls. Surprised, Cain says he only used a fire bullet at his full power, but the teacher says that no beginner spells can be that powerful. Later, the candidates proceed to the swordsmanship exams, and the examiner reveals that some A-rank adventurers will be helping them with the exams. Just then, Claude spots Cain and asks what he's doing there. In response, Cain says he's taking the entrance exam, so Claude decides to be his opponent. When Cain refuses, the examiner insists he must train with Claude. So the exam begins, and Claude tells Cain to give it all he's got. Immediately, Cain boosts his speed and attacks, surprising Claude. As they clash swords, Claude commends Cain on being strong and activates his boost as well. When they continue clashing swords, the examiner comments that it's enough since they've gotten the other students terrified. Claude then suggests they accept a quest together sometime, and the examiner tells Cain to go home and wait for the results to be announced. At home, Sylvia asks Cain how the exams went, and he replies that he nailed it. So Sylvia decides to throw a party to celebrate, but Cain says that it's too early for that. Some days later, Cain gets summoned by the king, who then questions him on what happened during the exam. In his defense, Cain says he was told that there's a barrier, but he ends up destroying it too. Surprised, the king asks if he can use emperor-level magic, and Cain says he can, but can't predict what effects it'll have on his surroundings. Afterwards, the king asks Cain where he took the exams, since Celestia and Silk didn't see him at the exam site. Just then, Cain realizes he's used the wrong entrance, and the king explains that he took his exams with commoner children. In addition, Eric reveals that the headmaster complained that a commoner got a perfect score in the exams and destroyed the training area. When he heard this, Eric laughed and asked if the name of the candidate was Cain. Shocked, the headmaster asked how he knew, and Eric suggested that he declare the results as they were. When Magna pulls out the repair bills, the king reminds Cain of his warnings to always be careful and reveals that the result will be announced that day. Later that day, when he goes to check the results, Silk calls him and reveals that he topped the class. After this, she reveals that Eric told her how he entered through the wrong gate and destroyed the training area. After she leaves, Cain runs into Rain in the academy, so when he calls, she runs over and hugs him, since it's been a while since they saw each other. Then, Rain commends Cain on acing the exams and wishes him good luck with his speech. Surprised, Cain asks what she means, and Rain explains that the top-scoring student always gives a speech. Back at Cain's mansion, Sylvia fidgets, and when Cain enters, she asks him how it went. In response, Cain reveals that he topped the class, making Sylvia tear up as she hugs him. After Colin congratulates Cain, Sylvia runs off to start the party. The next day at school, Cain spots his parents in the audience and waves at them, and then meets Silk and Tells, who were awestruck by his uniform. Shortly after, while Cain sits with Silk and Tells, the other boys wonder who he is and wish he just vaporize, while the other girls swoon over Cain. Afterwards, the headmaster announces the start of the entrance ceremony and calls on Cain to give his speech. So, on getting to the podium, Cain thanks the academy for forgiving him and treating him like the other students. After his impressive speech, while the audience applauds him, the king joins him on stage and congratulates the students. While aggressively patting some sense into Cain, the king adds that although some of the new students are irregular, he's sure everyone will do their best. But Cain gets the message while Eric laughs backstage. Later in class, Elka, the teacher, announces that each student will need to choose their course of study, and suggests they think carefully before choosing. However, Cain immediately says he'll go adventuring, but the ladies tell him he can't since he's a land-owning noble. Celestia then states that he'll need to learn about nobility. Sensing his reaction, Silk tells him not to sulk since he can choose adventuring alongside nobility. So Cain decides to go for all options. Meanwhile, Tells says she'll study nobility and internal affairs in order to manage Cain's future domains. Hearing this, Silk reveals that she'll also study nobility and commerce to help Cain. So Cain thanks them and promises to work hard. Soon after, when they step out of class, Cain spots some boys harassing Parma and tells the boys that everyone should be treated equally and reveals that Parma is his friend. Surprised, the boys ask Cain why he's siding with a commoner and not a noble. When Cain says he's only siding with his friends, one of the boys says he'll simply tell his dad to ruin Parma's family. Just then, Silk and Celestia join them and ask what's going on. Shocked, the boys grovel while Celestia asks if she needs to report them to her father. So, the boys apologize to Parma and vanished immediately. Just then, Cain tells Parma to find him if she needs help with anything, but Celestia and Silk comment that they need to talk since they seem close. So Silk commands Cain to sit on his heels while they talk to Parma. While on his knees, Cain hears a strange voice invite him to the library, so he gets up and leaves, unknown to the ladies. However, on entering the library, he gets teleported to a house where a man makes coffee. Surprised, Cain asks who he is, and the man introduces himself as Sheena. Afterwards, Sheena tells Cain to relax and reveals that he was once known as Yuia. Shocked, Cain explains that he read the book he wrote 300 years ago. Baffled, Cain wonders if he's a ghost, but Sheena suggests that he find out using his judgment skill. Cain opens his status and discovers that Sheena is actually the god of creation. After this, Sheena reveals that they're in a world named Fabniel, which he created, and reveals that Zenom and his gang asked him to train Cain. Hearing this, Cain says that he's having a hard time already since he's too strong. So Sheena tells him to snatch a cookie from him, but when Cain tries, he finds a sword at his neck. Sheena then points out that he has a long way to go, surprising Cain, who then asks why he needs to be stronger. In response, Sheena reveals that there's a lunatic he needs to fight, who once made people all over the world fight each other. Afterwards, Sheena reveals that he and his companions sealed Eren 300 years ago, but the seal has started to loosen. So, Cain suggests that Sheena seals him back, but Sheena reveals that he's now a god of a different world, and just like Zenom and the other, he can't interfere with another world. When Sheena states that it's all up to Cain, Cain says he saw it coming, but Sheena states that his previous life somehow comes into play. Afterwards, Sheena teleports them to a beach where he hands Cain a sword and reveals that he's his teacher from that point on. When Cain asks Sheena what he meant about his previous life coming into play, Sheena ignores the question and hands Cain a compass to follow if he wants to find the mansion they teleported from. After this, Sheena reveals that in Fabniel, Cain is mid and needs to be at least at level 600 to stand a chance against Eren. While Cain marvels at his new level, Sheena says he's sure it'll take some time and tells Cain not to speed up his movements. On hearing this, Cain asks about school, but Sheena explains that a year in Fabniel is equal to one day where he's from. When Sheena vanishes, Cain figures he has no choice, so he runs into the forest and is welcomed by a giant serpent, but he jumps over it and meets another giant beast. So Cain takes it out and goes ahead to face another monster. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Celestia ship and Silk visit to check on Cain, but we're told he's not been back since the previous day. While Sylvia wonders if he's been caught up in an incident, Celestia says he'll return soon. In Fabniel, a huge monster grabs Cain and tries to snack on him, but Cain manages to blast through it, while wondering if he'll ever make it out of the forest. It's been months, and he's barely had any sleep, so Cain hears a voice, and when he tries to locate it, he finds a hurt Fenrir and decides to put it out of its misery. But he suddenly gets flashbacks of the moments he saved the girls from the thief. So Cain drops his sword and forces himself to heal the Fenrir since he's low on magic. After this, he collapses and passes out, and in the meantime, the healed Fenrir takes down 3 gigantic monsters to protect Cain. When Cain awakens, the Fenrir leaps on him. However, since they're both lonely, Cain decides to take it along with him. So he names the Fenrir Haku, and since then, Cain refuses to give in, no matter how tough things get. When Cain finally arrives at Sheena's house, Sheena comments that he has gotten bigger. Cain then asks how long he thinks it has been, and Sheena reveals that it's been about 4 years. On spotting Haku, Sheena explains that it's a holy beast and adds that it might have formed a contract with Cain. Just then, Sheena reveals that his training isn't over yet and introduces him to Durain, his new teacher. After paying his respects, Cain asks Sheena about Eren and how it's all related to his previous life. So Sheena suggests that they talk before he leaves. A few moments later, Durain explains that Cain isn't strong enough, and to prove it, they sparred. But when Cain attacks Durain, he gets knocked out with a single punch. Later, when he awakens, he finds himself in a different place with Haku. So when he gets out, Ruri, Durain's wife, tells him to wait while she gets some food ready for him. Just then, Cain spots a young dragon and hurries down to make friends with it. But Haku jumps on him and scares off the dragon. Later, while they eat together, Cain takes the first bite and tears up, surprising Durain, who then asks if he doesn't like the food. But Cain explains that he hasn't had anything good in years. The next day, Cain takes some punches from Durain and withstands them this time, impressing Durain, who then throws more, but on getting home, Cain collapses. Subsequently, while training with Durain, Cain remembers when Sheena reveals that Aaron used to be the god of amusement in the Zenom's world, but used an oracle to make people all over the world play a death game. As a result, he was banished from the realm of the gods. Sheena then told Cain it'll happen again, and everyone precious to him will be caught up in it if Aaron returns. On hearing this, Cain asked Sheena how he could stop it, and Sheena told him to gain enough power to protect those he loves. In addition to this, Sheena revealed that Cain's parents were his friends, whom he failed to protect from Aaron. Cain's parent and Sheena were heroes summoned by the gods to help take Aaron down, but they both sacrificed their lives to ensure Aaron was sealed by Sheena. Annoyed by these memories, Cain defeats Durain for the first time, and Durain states that Hai's training is complete. So Cain thanks him and returns to Sheena's house, where he finds Sheena by his parents' graves. Just then, Sheena tells Cain that his parents were always thinking about getting back home to him. In response, Cain thanks Sheena for looking after his parents, while Sheena tests him with the cookie again. However, this time, Cain snatches it successfully, and Sheena comments that he's grown stronger. Just when he runs off, Sheena restores him to his usual size and allows him to take Haku along. At that moment, Durain also joins them and asks if he'd like to take Jin along. So Cain forms a contract with the dragon, and when he prepares to leave, Sheena hands him a sword for the present king. When Cain appears in his mansion, the ladies freak out on seeing him and welcome him with cookies they made. Excited, Cain gobbles up the entire tray while the girls welcome him home. Later, when Cain visits the king and narrates his experience, the king asks if it's really true. And Cain explains that Yuya created a different world and has been living there as its god of creation. When Magnus says it's impossible, Cain takes out the sword, and the king immediately recognizes it. After they believe him, Cain reveals that he underwent intensive training for 5 years. But the king freaks out and asks how it could have been 5 years, while Eric laughs and states that his request to advance to being an A rank adventurer will soon be cancelled if he doesn't act on it. So, Cain visits the guild master and asks why his registration is being cancelled. In response, the guild master says he's been worried since Cain hasn't been coming for quests. But when Cain says he's been busy at the academy, the guild master adds that Tuwana has been sad since he's been gone. Just then, Cain asks about his registration, and the guildmaster reminds him that he needs to subjugate some bandits. After the guildmaster hands him the details of the quest, Cain teleports to the location and flies over the area to locate the bandits. Shortly after, he finds them attacking a carriage belonging to Sabino's, Parma's dad, and when he lands, he finds Nina and Melly guarding the carriage. He then notices that Melly is hurt, so he heals her while the bandits taunt him. Annoyed by this, Cain decides to make them pay for injuring Melly. So the bandits attack, but Cain beats them one after another till there's none standing. When Cain comments that it's hard to hold back, his masters remember how scary he was. After the bandits were tied up, Melly asks Cain what he's doing out there, and he says that he took a quest to subdue the bandits at the guild. Surprised, Melly points out that he just registered at the guild, so Cain flaunts his golden card, making the ladies wonder how he skipped ranks and became an A rank. He then explains that some things happened that warranted his compulsory promotion. Afterwards, Sabino's asks what they'll do about the bandits, and Cain tells them to leave it to him. Some moments later, Cain pulls the bandits into town in a cage mounted on a carriage while everyone watches. Moments later, he makes a stop at Parma's house, where Sabino's narrates how Cain rescued them from the bandits. Hearing this, Parma asks Cain how he combines school, adventuring, and baron work. Shocked, Melly asks Cain if he is truly a baron and adds that she should mind the way she talks to him. However, Cain insists they're still his masters and tells them to keep it informal. So Melly hugs him and states that he's an adult, but Cain breaks free and says he has to get to the guild. So he pulls the carriage and runs along while Melly and Nina run after him. When he arrives at the guild counter, Cain informs Rada that he's done with the quest and the bandits are outside. Surprised, Rada leaves to inform the guildmaster while Cross and his losers show up and try a different Riz approach to get Melly. However, when she refuses, he tries to touch her, but Cain grabs his hand. The moment Cross remembers who Cain is, he freaks out, and just then, Claude arrives on the scene with Lena. After Cross and his friend vanish, Cain runs over to meet Claude and explains that they were bothering his friends. On looking around, Claude realizes that Melly and Nina are the friends he's talking about. Surprised, Cain asks how he knows them, and Claude reveals that Melly is his younger sister, while Melly reveals that she and Nina tutored Cain when he was little. Afterwards, while they celebrate the reunion over drinks, Claude asks why they're all together, and Melly narrates how Cain rescued them from the bandits. Nina then points out that Cain is in A rank. Claude marvels at this and points out that Cain just registered some days ago. However, Claude figures it's well-deserved since Cain was the only student who kept up with him during the exams. Just then, Nina adds that Cain is now a baron, shocking Claude and Lena. So Claude apologizes to Cain for being rude to him, while Melly wonders how he got so strong, enough to defeat a red dragon when he was younger. On hearing this, Claude states that the red dragon is an SS-rank beast, while Melly and Ninette decide to flaunt the magic bags he made for them. Curious, Lena asks them how much load it can hold. But when Nina reveals that it's capable of holding up to a mansion, Lena freaks out. Suddenly, she grabs Cain and complains about their bags being unable to hold much. So Cain decides to make one for them. Suddenly, Cain remembers he has to go to school, since he was absent the previous week, surprising Claude, who then asks if he fits in at school. In response, Cain says he does and adds that he has a lot to learn, so Nina offers him a hug, but he runs off. Just then, Risha shows up and reveals that a tutor taking the adventuring class the next day at the academy was injured, and they need a replacement. On hearing this, Claude asks her to tell him more about it. The next day at the academy, when the students were out to practice magic, Cain got excited, ready to show off what he learned on Fubneil. But to his dismay, the teacher said he had been prohibited from using attack magic, since it's more than the barriers can handle. While Claude and the ladies eavesdrop, they realize Cain isn't fitting in, so they decide to give him a hand. Later in class, the teacher announces that adventurers from the guild will be helping out, and just then, Claude and the others walk in, surprising Cain. So Claude asks the students who are adventurers to take out their cards, but since he is the only one with a golden card, Cain refuses to take out his. When Claude asks him why, Cain says he forgot to bring it along. Later, at the training grounds, Claude announces the start of mock battles, and Cain gets excited that he'll eventually get a chance to show off some skill. However, the tutors try to reserve him for last. Unfortunately, when it became Cain's turn, the bells went off, and the class was over. While Cain is devastated by this, Claude says they'll duel some other time. However, the teacher states that there won't be a next time since the academy can't afford it after the damage Cain caused. So Cain breaks down in tears. Later that night, in the monster's forest, Cain goes on a rampage to clear his head. And when the guard on watch spots fire raining on the forest, he raises an alarm and the army rides out. Meanwhile, Cain feels better and teleports, leaving his handkerchief again. So when Garm and his army arrived at the forest, they were surprised to find a crater and the handkerchief. The next day, the king questions Cain about the attacks in the forest, and although he denies it, the king presses him for answers, so he confesses to doing it. Somewhere else, Aaron awakens in form of a dragon and discovers that his seal is weakened. But since he's only partially affected, he gets excited in advance. The next day at the academy, the teacher announces that they'll be having a summoning class. When she asks if Cain is present, Cain moves to leave, thinking he won't be participating. But the teacher says he can participate since it's not an attack magic. After this, the specialist to teach them introduces himself as Grad, and states that they could either form a bond with a monster to form a bond with it, or summon the monster with a magic circle and form a contract with it. After teaching them how to cast the circles, the students summoned cute creatures and formed contracts with them. When everyone was done, Cain was asked to try, but the moment he casts his circle, the tutor gets terrified, and suddenly the Prince of Darkness emerges from the circle and asks why a human summoned him. Seeing this, Cain uses a flash spell to prevent everyone from seeing that he summoned the devil. While Cain wonders if he's on Aaron's side, the Prince of Darkness approaches him, so Cain draws his sword. But to his surprise, the Prince of Darkness falls before him and agrees to form a contract with him. When the Prince of Darkness states that he'll deploy the entire demon clan if Cain needs to destroy a nation, Cain freaks out, saying he's not interested in all that. So the Prince of Darkness introduces himself as Seth and tells Cain to call him if he changes his mind. Later, when the king summons Cain and asks what he summoned at school, Cain confesses that he summoned the Prince of Darkness. Shocked, the king asks what he did after that, and Cain reveals that he formed a contract. All of a sudden, the king lectures him on self-restraint and chips, in that Seth could have easily destroyed the royal capital. When Cain apologizes and says he didn't see it coming, the king guesses his training with Yuya must have increased his magic, so he asks Cain to show them his status and instructs Grat to keep it secret. So Cain opens his status, and they freak out when they realize he's now a demigod. Suddenly, Grat bows to him, while the king comments that Cain could destroy the world, but Cain says he'll never do such and asks them to treat him like they always have. After this, the king decided to make Cain a viscount and give him a town to rule over as he pleased. Later, at his mansion, while Sylvia congratulates him, Colin informs him that Garm got a report from Jin that there's been an onslaught in the forest of the monsters. So Cain visits Jin, who then reveals that there's been an increase in the number of monster attacks. So he sent some adventurers to look into it, and they reported that the number of roaming monsters had grown. When he explains that all signs point to the likelihood of a monster invasion occurring, Cain decides to take a look around the forest. However, Jin says he can't allow him. But when Cain shows him his A-rank adventurer's card, Jin marvels at this and offers to help however he can. Afterwards, Cain visits the town guild, where he meets a receptionist who comments that the capital must be short-handed to have sent Cain. However, when he takes out his golden card, she freaks out while Rudy apologizes for her ignorance. So Rudy asks Cain why he showed up, and Cain reveals that he was told about the onslaught going on in the forests. In response, Rudy confirms this and reveals that many adventurers have been injured. Just then, Melly and Nina arrive, and when they ask Cain what he's doing at the guild, he explains that Jin, the administrator of the town, sent for him. Curious, Cain asks why they showed up, and they say they were sent by the guild. So he asks if they've been to the forest, and Nina explains that the monsters were stronger and moved in groups. So they decided to wait for Claude and Lena before going back. After this, Rudy asks Cain what he plans to do, and he says he'll have to check the forest. However, the lady suggests he wait for Claude, but Cain says he has to quickly get an idea of what's going on. Despite this, they insist he go with someone at least, so Cain assures them he won't go alone. Later in the forest, Cain summons Haku and Jin, and after their brief reunion, he tells them to let him know if they sense something. As they search the forest, Cain feels like he's being watched, so he hunts monsters, but the feeling persists. Just then, he summons Seth and asks him to find out what's wrong. So, Seth reveals that there's a being with an overwhelming presence that the monsters are trying to reach. When he adds that they're high-level creatures, Cain asks him to probe deeper. After this, Seth summons Dalmatia, his subordinate who specializes in investigations. Dalmatia then asks Seth who Cain is, and in response, Seth says he's the chosen one who will conquer the world. While Dalmatia bows to him, Cain refutes this and asks them to get to work. Dalmatia then activates his skill, and monsters begin to pop up around the forest. Immediately, Cain goes after them and hunts them down, surprising Dalmatia. When Cain finishes, he decides to head back to town. Shortly after this, when Cain arrives at the guild with a heap load of monsters, everyone freaks out, since they're S-rank monsters. Meanwhile, Dalmatia proves deeper and states that something's trying to intimidate him and prevent him from investigating. However, Seth takes this as a challenge and decides they'll dive right in. Just when Seth and Dalmatia break into a different realm, Aaron orders the monsters to attack while they watch and decides to alert Cain. Back in town, Seth appears and informs Cain that the monsters are attacking in their numbers. So Cain orders Rudy to inform Jin and tells Claude to prevent the monsters from invading the town. Curious, Claude asks what he'll do, and Cain says he'll go into the forest. When Rudy chips in that it's too dangerous, Cain states that he's got friends unregistered with the guild but are stronger than a rank. Hearing this, Seth blushes and decides to put his life on the line. Just when they prepare to head out, Tawana shows up and jumps on Cain. Surprised, Cain asks why she's there, and Tawana reveals that the Margrave requested the help of the chivalric order. So Cain tells her to lead the knights and protect his hometown. When they arrive at the forest, the monsters are on a rampage, so Dalmatia defeats a few of them but almost gets cremated by a dragon. While they figure out where Aaron must be, Aaron awaits them and announces that the game has begun. After this, Seth assures Cain that he can handle the monsters and suggests that he go after the ringleader. When Cain asks if he'll be fine on his own, Seth states that he'll summon his army, but adds that a part of the forest might be lost. So Cain tells them not to go too far, so they part ways. Meanwhile, in the city, Tawana controls the crowd and orders the knights to prevent any invasion. Nina then scans the area and discovers that an army of monsters is approaching at a blistering pace. Suddenly, Melly says she's headed for the forest, but when Claude asks if she's in her right senses, Melly says they can't leave Cain to handle it alone. So Nina decides to join her, provoking Claude and Lena to join up. In the forest, Seth summons his loyal subjects, who then ask what they can do for him. In response, Seth reveals that a friend requested his help to protect the forest. While his subjects marvel at this, Dalmatia shows up, and the summons are surprised to see the legendary demon general. When they ask why he's there, Dalmatia reveals he's there on Seth's friend's request. While they wonder who the friend is, Dalmatia says he's a demigod and a chosen one who entered a contract with Seth. While they gave him the questioning look, Seth promised to explain later and commanded them to get to work. Immediately, the demons foot over the monsters and eliminate them from above. Meanwhile, Cain roasts as many monsters as he can. But just when he figures he isn't getting anywhere, he senses an incoming attack and casts a fire spell to block it. Just then, he meets Aaron's dragon form, who then calls Cain the god's pet dog. In response, Cain identifies the former god of amusement, but Aaron says it's sad that only a part of him is revived, and he had to borrow a dragon's body. Suddenly, Aaron starts making more monsters, and Cain tells him to stop. However, Aaron laughs at him and states that it's a game that he doesn't intend to stop. While he continues to churn out more monsters, Aaron asks Cain how long he thinks his friends can last. Meanwhile, Claude points out that some people are floating in the air, but his wife knocks him on the head and says it's not the time for jokes. However, when he says he's serious, they all look up and are surprised to see the people getting rid of monsters. Just then, Bina reveals that they must be Cain's friends. While the demons get overwhelmed, Seth orders them to do the best they can and leave the rest to the humans. So Claude and the other get to work, cutting down monsters. Deep in the forest, Aaron points out that it's infuriating that Cain has the eyes of the people who sealed him. When Cain asks if he means his parents, Aaron attacks again, but Cain defends himself with a fire spell. However, Aaron breaks through the flames and states that although he's not fully revived, such spells won't work on him. Suddenly, Aaron chases Cain and tries to blast him out of existence, but Cain summons Haku and Jin to attack him. Somewhere else in the forest, Claude and the other adventurers get overwhelmed by the attacking monsters, and just when his batteries run out, Claude encourages them to keep fighting, but a giant monster suddenly attacks him. Fortunately, Tawana arrives in time to unalive the monster, and thanks them for holding off the monsters. She then announces that reinforcements have arrived, and assures them that the town defenses are solid. After this, they decide to defend the front line together. Deep in the forest, Aaron tries to roast Haku, but Jin protects him, and since Aaron doesn't stop, Cain steps in to protect his friends. Suddenly, Cain talks about protecting the smiles of everyone he loves and activates an overload spell, which makes him glow. Seeing this reminds Aaron of the last time he was sealed, so Cain goes all out with the spell, and a bright light suddenly shoots into the skies while everyone watches from the city. Just then, Haku and Jin pull Cain's legs to stop him, but he insists he's busy. However, he stops when Seth and Dalmatia arrive and points out that the damage he's caused was unnecessary. Just then, Cain realizes he almost destroyed the planet. When they give him the talk on controlling himself, Cain asks about the Black Dragon, but they, in turn, ask if he sees any around. Surprised, Cain asks about the onslaught, and they reveal that the monsters retreated and the onslaught is over. Afterwards, Cain reunites with his adventurer friends while the demons commend the god's choice. Later, the king questions Cain about the pillar of light in the sky, and he explains that it's a spell he fired off while fighting the Black Dragon. When the king added that some people thought the gods had descended, Cain explains that his intermediate magic didn't work, so he had to use emperor-level magic. After reminding him of his lessons on self-restraint, the king asks about the men casting spells mid-air, and Cain reveals that it's the Prince of Darkness. Hearing this, they all freak out, so the king decides to grant Cain a domain as a reward. The next day, the king makes Cain a viscount and grants him a domain called Dorenthal. Unknown to him, Dorenthal is one of the most notorious domains known for making nobles' lives miserable. Despite this, Cain says he's excited since he'll get to build a new town. Sometime later, a knight tells the king stories of how Cain knocked some sense into Dorenthal's notorious residence and built a castle much better looking than his. If you could pick any of Cain's many abilities, which would you go for? Let's know in the comments. If you want more videos like this, like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks.